When Sophia Chen walked into Pinehurst Country Club that sunny afternoon with her 78-year-old father by her side, she never imagined that within 20 minutes she'd witness the complete destruction of careers built over decades. What started as a simple lunch reservation would become the most expensive mistake this exclusive establishment had ever made. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Georgia heat shimmered off the pristine asphalt as Sophia Chen's black Tesla Model S glided through the wrought iron gates of Pinehurst Country Club. Spanish moss draped the ancient oak trees lining the cobblestone drive, casting dappled shadows across manicured lawns that stretched toward the colonial-style clubhouse. At 34, Sophia had grown accustomed to luxury, but this particular venue held special significance. It was where her late mother had dreamed of celebrating her parents' 50th wedding anniversary before cancer cut those plans short. "Look at this place, Dad," Sophia said, adjusting the rearview mirror to catch her father's expression. Samuel Chen sat in the passenger seat, his weathered hands smoothing his best navy blazer, the same one he'd worn to Sophia's Harvard graduation 8 years earlier. Despite his 78 years, his posture remained military straight, a remnant from his decades as an Army engineer. "Your mother would have loved it here," Samuel replied, his voice carrying that familiar mix of pride and melancholy that had colored their conversations since the funeral 6 months ago. "She always said you'd achieve things we could only dream about." Sophia smiled, though her grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. As CEO of Meridian Technologies, a software company she'd built from nothing into a $200 million enterprise, she'd certainly exceeded her parents' modest expectations. But success had come with its own challenges, particularly in boardrooms and social circles, where faces like hers remained frustratingly rare. The valet stand appeared ahead, staffed by 3 young men in crisp white polo shirts. Sophia pulled up to the designated spot and stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the stone. The afternoon sun caught the subtle sheen of her charcoal business dress, conservative enough for a country club, but tailored to perfection. She'd learned long ago that presentation mattered in spaces like this, where judgment came swift and often silent. "Good afternoon," she addressed the nearest valet, a lanky young man whose name tag read Tyler. She extended her keys with a warm smile. "We have a lunch reservation." Tyler's eyes swept over her, then the car, then landed on Samuel as he slowly emerged from the passenger side. Something shifted in the young man's expression, subtle but unmistakable. His professional smile faltered for just a moment before returning, though it no longer reached his eyes. Sure thing," Tyler said, accepting the keys with noticeably less enthusiasm than he'd shown the previous guest, a silver-haired man in golf attire who'd received warm greetings and inquiries about his recent trip to Scotland. Sophia noticed the change, but chose to ignore it. She'd fought bigger battles than surly valets. Taking her father's arm, she guided him toward the clubhouse entrance, where massive mahogany doors stood open beneath a gleaming brass plaque. Pinehurst Country Club, established 1923, members and invited guests only. The interior took her breath away. Soaring ceilings supported by exposed beams created an atmosphere of old-world elegance, while crystal chandeliers cast warm light across Persian rugs and leather furniture arranged in intimate conversation areas. Oil paintings of fox hunts and pastoral scenes adorned the walls, and the subtle scent of cedar and leather created an ambiance of established privilege. "May I help you?" The voice belonged to a woman behind an ornate reception desk, her silver hair styled in a perfect bob and her pearl necklace catching the chandelier light. Her nameplate identified her as Margaret Winthrop, assistant manager. "Yes, we have a reservation for 2 at 1:30, Sophia replied. "Under Chen." Margaret's fingers moved across her computer keyboard with practiced efficiency, but her brow furrowed as she scrolled through the screen. "Chen, you said?" "That's correct, Sophia Chen." The clicking continued, accompanied by increasingly dramatic sighs. "I'm not seeing anything under that name." "Are you certain you made the reservation here?" Sophia felt her father's arm tense beneath her hand. She'd made the reservation herself 3 weeks ago, confirming it twice. Once when she initially called, and again yesterday when she'd verified the time. "I called 3 weeks ago and spoke with someone named Jennifer. She confirmed a table for 2 at 1:30 today." "Jennifer?" Margaret's tone suggested she'd never heard the name before. We don't have anyone by that name working here. Perhaps you're thinking of another establishment? The condescension in her voice was subtle but clear. Sophia recognized the technique, plausible deniability wrapped in professional courtesy. She'd encountered it in business deals, at networking events, and now, apparently, at country clubs. I specifically asked for Pinehurst Country Club, Sophia said, maintaining her composure despite the heat rising in her cheeks. The woman I spoke with confirmed the address, mentioned the parking arrangements, and even recommended the salmon. Margaret's smile grew more strained. Well, I'm terribly sorry. But without a reservation, I simply cannot accommodate you. As I'm sure you understand, we maintain very strict policies about membership and guest privileges. Samuel stepped forward slightly, his engineer's mind apparently working through the logistics. Perhaps there's been a computer error? These things happen with technology. I assure you, sir, our systems are quite reliable, Margaret replied, her tone suggesting that questioning the club's technology was tantamount to heresy. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the restaurants in town. There's a lovely Applebee's just 15 minutes away. The suggestion hit like a slap. Sophia felt her father's entire body stiffen beside her. In his generation, such redirection carried unmistakable implications, and his military bearing couldn't quite mask the hurt that flickered across his features. We'll wait, Sophia said firmly. I'd like to speak with your manager about this reservation mix-up. Margaret's professional mask slipped slightly. Mr. Harrison is quite busy today. Perhaps if you called later in the week. We'll wait, Sophia repeated, her voice carrying the authority that had closed multi-million-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms full of executives twice her age. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the appearance of a tall man in an expensive suit interrupted the tension. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his bearing suggested someone accustomed to deference. He surveyed the scene with calculating eyes, taking in Sophia's designer dress, Samuel's careful grooming, and Margaret's obvious discomfort. Is there a problem here? He asked, his southern accent cultured but carrying an edge of impatience. Mr. Harrison, Margaret said, relief flooding her voice. These people claim to have a reservation, but I cannot locate it in our system. Gregory Harrison, according to the brass nameplate on his lapel, studied Sophia with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades determining who belonged in exclusive spaces and who didn't. His assessment was thorough and, she sensed, already reaching its conclusion. Gregory Harrison's assessment lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to catalog Sophia's appearance, her father's age, and draw his conclusions. His smile emerged, calculated and cold, the kind reserved for situations requiring delicate handling. Miss Chen, is it? Harrison's voice carried the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to delivering unwelcome news diplomatically. I'm afraid Margaret is correct. Our reservation system is quite sophisticated, and if there's no record of your booking, well... He spread his hands in a gesture meant to convey helpless regret. Sophia pulled out her phone, scrolling to recall history. I have the confirmation number right here, R4789-B. The woman I spoke with said to reference that number upon arrival. Harrison barely glanced at the screen. Anyone could generate a random sequence of letters and numbers. Our confirmation codes follow a very specific algorithm that... Then call your system administrator, Sophia interrupted. Check your phone logs from 3 weeks ago. Verify the algorithm. The suggestion seemed to amuse Harrison. I'm afraid that would be quite irregular. We simply cannot accommodate every person who walks in claiming to have made reservations. Surely you understand the position that would put us in. Samuel's jaw tightened. During his 30-year military career, he faced down hostile negotiations with foreign contractors and navigated complex engineering disputes. But this situation felt different, more personal, and somehow more degrading than professional conflicts ever had. Perhaps, Harrison continued, this is simply a case of miscommunication. These mix-ups happen more often than you might think, particularly when people aren't familiar with our standard procedures. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sophia felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger yet, but a cold recognition of exactly what was happening. She'd built her company by reading people, by understanding the subtext beneath polite words, and Harrison's message was crystalline clear. Your standard procedures, she repeated slowly. And what exactly do those involve? Well, for starters, all reservations must be made by current members in good standing. Guests cannot book directly. Harrison's tone suggested he was explaining something obvious to a child. The member must be present during the entire visit, and advance approval is required for any non-member dining requests. Quote, Margaret nodded vigorously from behind her desk, as if this information had been prominently displayed and Sophia had simply failed to notice it. Interesting, Sophia said, because when I called, none of those requirements were mentioned. In fact, Jennifer specifically asked about dietary restrictions and wine preferences. She seemed quite knowledgeable about accommodating guests. As I mentioned, we have no employee named Jennifer, Harrison replied. Perhaps you reached a different establishment entirely? Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The gaslighting was masterful in its execution. No raised voices, no obvious hostility, just a systematic dismantling of her account through polite skepticism. Sophia recognized the technique because she'd seen it deployed against other executives who didn't fit expected profiles. The beauty of the approach was its deniability. Any complaint would sound paranoid and unfounded. Other club members had begun to notice the extended conversation at the reception desk. An elderly woman in a tennis outfit paused her discussion with friends to observe the scene. Two men in golf attire stopped their handshake to glance over. The attention wasn't curious. It was expectant, as if they were witnessing a familiar drama play out according to script. Dad, Sophia said quietly, why don't you have a seat while we sort this out? Samuel's pride rebelled against the suggestion. I'm fine standing, sweetheart. But Harrison seized on the exchange. Actually, I'm not sure loitering in our reception area is appropriate. If you don't have confirmed reservations or member sponsorship, I'll have to ask you to conduct your business elsewhere. The word loitering landed like a physical blow. Samuel's hands clenched at his sides, and Sophia saw decades of similar encounters flash across his weathered features. He'd faced this before, in different contexts, different eras, but the underlying message remained unchanged. We're not loitering, Sophia said, her voice carrying a warning edge. We're attempting to resolve a reservation discrepancy. Which, we've determined, doesn't exist, Harrison replied smoothly. So at this point, yes, you are loitering. The accusation drew more attention from nearby members. Conversations quieted as people turned to watch the unfolding scene. Their expressions ranged from uncomfortable to intrigued, but none showed surprise. This was apparently not the first time such a situation had occurred. A woman in her 50s approached the reception desk, her designer handbag clutched tightly. Gregory, she said, her voice pitched to Carrie. Is everything all right? Some of us were wondering about the situation. Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Pemberton, Harrison assured her. Just a simple misunderstanding that we're resolving. Mrs. Pemberton's gaze swept over Sophia and Samuel with barely concealed disdain. I do hope proper procedures are being followed. We can't have just anyone wandering around the club, can we? Quote, the chorus of agreement from nearby members was subtle, but unmistakable. Sophia realized she was witnessing something choreographed, not consciously planned, perhaps, but executed with the precision of long practice. This was how the club maintained its exclusivity without explicitly stating its policies. I think it's time for you both to leave, Harrison said, his patience apparently exhausted, before this becomes more unpleasant than necessary. Samuel stepped forward, his military bearing evident despite his age. Son, I served this country for 30 years. I earned the right to be treated with basic dignity. I'm sure you did, Harrison replied, his tone suggesting anything but certainty. But military service doesn't override club policies. I'm going to have to insist that you both leave immediately. The gathered members nodded approvingly. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, the restoration of order, the reaffirmation of boundaries. Their relief was palpable. Sophia felt her father's humiliation like a physical weight. She'd brought him here to create a positive memory, to honor her mother's wishes, and instead had subjected him to public degradation. The guilt mixed with her growing fury to create something cold and focused. Of course, she said finally, her voice perfectly controlled. We wouldn't want to violate any policies. Harrison's smile returned, genuine now in its triumph. I appreciate your understanding. Margaret will be happy to recommend some excellent restaurants in town that might be more suitable. Sophia nodded graciously, taking her father's arm. That won't be necessary. We'll find our own way. As they walked toward the exit, she could hear the murmur of satisfied conversation resuming behind them. The crisis had passed, order was restored, and the club's standards had been maintained. Harrison was probably already crafting the story he'd tell other members about how he'd handled the situation with appropriate firmness but perfect politeness. What none of them realized was that Sophia Chen never retreated. She simply repositioned for a more effective attack. The humid Georgia air hit them like a wall as they stepped outside. Sophia's Tesla waited in the valet area, but she made no move toward it. Instead, she guided her father to a wrought iron bench beneath one of the ancient oaks, far enough from the clubhouse entrance to avoid the curious stares still filtering through the windows. Samuel sat heavily, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have known better than to let you bring me to a place like this." "Dad, no!" Sophia's voice was fierce. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing." But she could see the damage in his shoulders, the way they curved inward as if trying to make himself smaller. It was the same posture she'd witnessed as a child when store clerks followed them through aisles or restaurant hostesses claimed no tables were available despite obvious empty sections. "Your mother was right," Samuel continued, staring at his hands. "She always said these places weren't for people like us, said we should build our own success and not worry about their approval." Sophia pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with purposeful precision. "Mom was wrong about one thing, Dad. She thought we had to accept their rejection, but she never saw what I'd become." "What are you doing?" "Research." Her screen displayed the Georgia Secretary of State's business registration database. Within seconds, she located Pinehurst Country Club's corporate structure, ownership details, and financial filings. "Did you know this place has been struggling financially for the past 3 years?" Samuel glanced at the imposing clubhouse with its manicured grounds. "Doesn't look like it." "Appearances can be deceiving." Sophia's voice carried the cool, analytical tone she used during hostile takeovers. "Membership is down 28%, revenue declining annually, and they've defaulted on 2 loan payments in the past 18 months. She scrolled deeper into the financial records, cross-referencing property assessments and tax documents. The picture that emerged was of an institution living far beyond its means, sustained by reputation rather than reality. "They've been hemorrhaging money trying to maintain this facade," she continued. "The building needs major structural repairs they can't afford. The kitchen equipment is 15 years past replacement, and their insurance premiums have tripled due to discrimination lawsuits." "Discrimination lawsuits?" Sophia's smile was sharp. 3 in the past 5 years, all settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. "Apparently, we're not the first family to experience Harrison's hospitality." She opened another app, her personal investment portfolio. The numbers that appeared would have impressed even the wealthiest Pinehurst members. Meridian Technologies' success had generated wealth that dwarfed most individual fortunes, and Sophia had invested wisely across multiple sectors. "Look at this, Dad." She showed him the screen displaying her holdings in Consolidated Southern Bank, the primary lender for Pinehurst Country Club's mortgage and operating loans. "I own 12% of the bank that keeps this place afloat." Samuel's eyes widened as the implications became clear. "You could. I could call my friend Rachel Martinez, the CEO, and have a very interesting conversation about loan compliance and community lending standards." Sophia's tone was conversational, but her eyes held a predatory gleam. Discriminatory practices tend to violate federal banking regulations. She was already dialing, putting the phone on speaker as it rang. "Sophia," Rachel's warm voice filled the air. "Please tell me you're calling about the charity gala and not some crisis that requires my immediate attention." "Actually, it's more of an opportunity," Sophia replied. "I'm sitting outside Pinehurst Country Club, and I've just learned some fascinating things about their loan portfolio." "Oh no." Rachel's tone shifted to professional concern. "What happened?" "Let's just say their management team demonstrated some very interesting policies regarding guest accommodations. Policies that might raise questions about their compliance with fair lending practices." There was a pause as Rachel processed the implications. As CEO of a federally regulated bank, she took discrimination issues seriously, both from moral conviction and legal necessity. "Are you telling me they discriminated against you?" Rachel's voice carried an edge of steel. "At a facility we're financing?" "I'm telling you that their general manager, Gregory Harrison, and assistant manager, Margaret Winthrop, created a situation that my lawyers would find very interesting. particularly given the club's history of similar settlements. Hold on, the sound of rapid typing filled the air. I'm pulling their file now. Jesus, Sophia, their payment history is already concerning. We've been monitoring them closely. Samuel watched his daughter with growing amazement. This wasn't the angry victim he'd expected to comfort. This was a predator who'd identified wounded prey and was calculating her attack with surgical precision. What kind of monitoring? Sophia asked. Quarterly reviews, cash flow analysis, compliance audits. They're technically current on payments, but barely. One missed payment triggers acceleration clauses. Rachel paused. And now you're telling me they might have discrimination issues? I'm telling you that in the next 24 hours, you might receive some very detailed documentation about their practices. Documentation that could raise questions about whether your bank wants to be associated with such an organization. Understood. Rachel's voice was grimly satisfied. I'll need to discuss this with our legal team immediately. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. After ending the call, Sophia opened her contacts again, scrolling to another familiar name. Who now? Samuel asked. David Park. He runs the city's largest catering company and handles most of the major corporate events in Atlanta. She pressed the dial. Including several contracts with Pinehurst. David answered on the second ring. Sophia, how's the Queen of Tech treating the world today? I'm good, David, but I've got a question. Do you still handle events at Pinehurst Country Club? Unfortunately, yes. They're consistently late on payments and treat my staff terribly, but the contract volume is substantial. Why? Because I think you should know about their management practices before your next event planning meeting. Sophia's voice carried a hint of warning. Practices that might reflect poorly on vendors who choose to work with them. What kind of practices? The kind that could generate negative publicity for everyone associated with the organization. The kind that might make your other clients question your judgment. David was quiet for a moment. Like most successful business owners, he understood the importance of reputation management. Are we talking about something that could blow back on my company? I'm saying that within 24 hours, Pinehurst Country Club is going to have some very serious problems. Problems that might make association with them complicated. I appreciate the heads up. Let me review our contractual obligations and see what flexibility we have. As she ended the call, Samuel realized he was witnessing something remarkable. His daughter wasn't just angry. She was systematically dismantling the economic ecosystem that supported the club's arrogance. There's more, isn't there? He asked. Sophia's smile was cold and satisfied. Dad, Harrison made a critical error. He assumed we were powerless because of how we looked. But power isn't always visible, and revenge is a dish best served through proper channels. She stood and straightened her dress, her executive bearing fully restored. Come on. We have one more stop to make before we watch their world collapse. Samuel rose, his own posture straightening as he began to understand the magnitude of what his daughter had set in motion. Where are we going? To see the mayor. It turns out the city owns the land beneath Pinehurst's golf course, and their Atlanta City Hall's marble steps gleamed in the afternoon sun as Sophia and Samuel approached the imposing neoclassical building. The contrast with their morning's destination was stark. Where Pinehurst projected exclusivity through intimidation, the government building radiated accessibility through its open design and welcoming public spaces. You really think the mayor will see us without an appointment? Samuel asked as they passed through the metal detectors. Marcus owes me a favor, Sophia replied, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Several, actually. The elevator whisked them to the 8th floor, where the mayor's office occupied a corner suite with sweeping views of the city. Sophia approached the reception desk with the confidence of someone who belonged in these corridors of power. Hi, Patricia, she greeted the mayor's secretary warmly. Is Marcus available? I have something time-sensitive to discuss. Patricia Williams looked up from her computer, her face brightening with recognition. Miss Chen! I didn't see you on the schedule today. Emergency consultation, Sophia said with a meaningful look. The kind that affects municipal revenue. Within minutes, they were ushered into Mayor Marcus Jefferson's office. A tall man in his early 50s with graying temples and intelligent eyes, Jefferson had built his political career on pragmatic governance and coalition building. His office walls displayed awards from various civic organizations alongside photos with community leaders. including several featuring Sophia at charity events and economic development ceremonies. Sophia, Marcus rose from behind his desk, extending his hand warmly before turning to Samuel. And you must be Mr. Chen. Your daughter speaks of you often. Thank you for seeing us without notice, Samuel replied, clearly impressed by the reception. Marcus gestured toward a seating area near the windows. For the person who brought 3 major tech companies and 400 jobs to our downtown district, my door is always open. As they settled into leather chairs overlooking the city, Sophia's expression grew serious. Marcus, I need to discuss Pinehurst Country Club's municipal relationships. The mayor's eyebrows rose slightly. That's an interesting topic. May I ask why? Because they just demonstrated that their management practices are fundamentally incompatible with the city's diversity and inclusion initiatives. Sophia's voice carried the measured tone of someone building a legal case. And I believe the city should be aware of this before making any long-term commitments. Marcus leaned forward, his political instincts clearly activated. What kind of practices? Sophia recounted the afternoon's events with clinical precision, focusing on facts rather than emotions. She described the systematic denial of service, the fabricated policy explanations, and the public humiliation orchestrated by Harrison and his staff. This happened today? Marcus's voice carried a note of genuine anger. At a facility that holds a city lease and receives municipal services? It did, Samuel confirmed quietly. I'm 78 years old, Mr. Mayor. I've seen enough to recognize the difference between honest mistakes and deliberate discrimination. Marcus stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the city he'd sworn to serve. Sophia, you said something about municipal relationships. What exactly are you referring to? The 15-acre parcel beneath their golf course, she replied. City-owned land leased to Pinehurst for the past 30 years. The lease expires September 15th, next month. The mayor turned back to face them, his expression thoughtful. And you think this incident should influence renewal decisions? I think the city should consider whether it wants to continue subsidizing an organization that practices discrimination, Sophia said carefully. Particularly when that lease could generate significantly more revenue through alternative uses. Marcus returned to his chair, pulling out a legal pad. Walk me through the specifics of what you observed. For the next 20 minutes, Sophia provided a detailed account while Marcus took notes. He asked probing questions about timing, witnesses, and specific language used by club staff. His approach was methodical, the behavior of someone building a documented case. This is troubling, Marcus said finally, but I need to ask, why bring this to me rather than pursuing private legal remedies? Sophia's smile was sharp. Because private lawsuits can be settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Public accountability through municipal action creates permanent change. And because, Samuel added with a growing understanding of his daughter's strategy, the city has more leverage than individual plaintiffs. Marcus nodded approvingly. Mr. Chen is correct. Municipal contracts carry compliance requirements that private arrangements don't. He made another note. Sophia, what outcome are you seeking? Justice, she replied simply. Real consequences for institutional discrimination, not just financial settlements that allow the behavior to continue. The mayor set down his pen and looked directly at both of them. I want you to know that this conversation is being documented. What you've described, if accurate, represents a clear violation of the city's anti-discrimination policies for municipal contractors. It's accurate, Sophia said firmly. Then here's what happens next. Marcus's tone shifted to official business mode. I'm directing our legal department to conduct an immediate investigation. We'll interview witnesses, review security footage if available, and examine Pinehurst's compliance with their lease obligations. Samuel leaned forward. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Fast, Marcus replied. Given the lease renewal deadline, we need answers within days, not weeks. He turned to Sophia. I assume you'd be willing to provide a formal statement. Absolutely, and I can provide contact information for other families who've experienced similar treatment. Other families? Harrison mentioned this wasn't unusual. A little research revealed a pattern of incidents over several years. Sophia's preparation was evident. I took the liberty of reaching out to some of the previous victims. Marcus's expression darkened. How many others? 7 families in the past 3 years who were willing to talk, probably more who weren't. Sophia handed him a folder she'd prepared during their drive downtown. Names, dates, and detailed accounts of similar incidents. The mayor opened the folder, scanning the contents with growing concern. This paints a picture of systematic discrimination rather than isolated incidents. Quote, which is exactly what the city needs to consider when making lease renewal decisions, Sophia agreed. Marcus closed the folder and stood again. I'm calling an emergency meeting with our legal team and city council members for 6 o'clock tonight. This cannot wait for our regular Tuesday session. What about Pinehurst? Samuel asked. Do they know what's coming? Not yet, Marcus replied, but they will soon enough. Sophia, I need one more thing from you. Name it. I want you at tonight's meeting. The council needs to hear directly from someone who experienced this treatment. His expression was grim, but determined. And I want them to understand exactly who Pinehurst chose to discriminate against. As they prepared to leave, Marcus walked them to the door personally, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by his staff. Sophia, he said quietly, I'm sorry this happened to you and your father, but I'm grateful you brought it to my attention through proper channels. Thank you, Marcus. Dad and I will see you at 6. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Samuel looked at his daughter with new respect. How long have you been planning this approach? Since the moment Harrison called us loiterers, Sophia replied. I learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting even through legitimate channels that create lasting change. The elevator doors opened, revealing the bustling lobby filled with citizens conducting business with their government. Samuel watched his daughter navigate the space with easy familiarity, greeting several staff members by name. Your mother would be proud, he said as they reached the street. She'd be furious we had to fight this battle at all, Sophia corrected. But yes, she'd be proud of how we're fighting it. They climbed into the Tesla, and Sophia checked her phone. Multiple missed calls and text messages indicated that her earlier conversations were already bearing fruit. Ready for the next phase, Dad? Samuel buckled his seatbelt with determination. Lead the way, sweetheart. Lease comes up for renewal next month. Back at Pinehurst Country Club, Gregory Harrison was enjoying what he considered a successful afternoon. The unwanted visitors had been efficiently removed, club operations had returned to normal, and several members had personally commended his handling of the situation. He sat in his office reviewing weekly revenue reports when his phone began ringing with unusual frequency. The first call came from Consolidated Southern Bank's legal department. Mr. Harrison, this is Jennifer Walsh from CSB Legal. We need to schedule an immediate compliance review regarding your loan agreements. Harrison frowned, setting down his coffee cup. I'm sorry, what kind of review? Our payments are current. This concerns potential violations of federal fair lending regulations. We've received information suggesting discriminatory practices at your facility that could impact our institution's regulatory standing. The words hit Harrison like ice water. Federal banking regulations carried penalties that could destroy businesses overnight. I think there's been some misunderstanding. We operate strictly within all applicable laws. Nevertheless, we need to conduct an on-site review within 48 hours. Our investigators will require access to your membership records, guest policies, and staff training materials. Harrison's hand tightened on the phone. Investigators? Yes, sir. This is now a formal compliance matter. You'll receive official notification within the hour. The line went dead, leaving Harrison staring at his phone in confusion. Within minutes, it rang again. Pinehurst Country Club. This is Gregory Harrison. Mr. Harrison, this is David Park from Elite Catering Services. I'm calling to inform you that we're terminating our service contracts effective immediately. What? Harrison shot to his feet. David, what are you talking about? We have events scheduled through December. Our legal team has advised us that continuing our association with your facility poses unacceptable business risks. We'll honor this weekend's commitment, but all future bookings are canceled. Business risks? What business risks? I think you know exactly what I'm referring to, Mr. Harrison. My company cannot afford to be associated with organizations that engage in discriminatory practices. The accusation stunned Harrison into silence. When he finally found his voice, David had already hung up. Before he could process what was happening, Margaret Winthrop burst into his office without knocking. Gregory, we have a problem, she said, her usual composure completely shattered. The Pemberton wedding reception for next month. They just canceled. And the Morrison anniversary party. And the Johnson corporate retreat. Quote, Harrison sank back into his chair. All of them? Mrs. Pemberton said she heard disturbing rumors about the club's management practices and couldn't risk associating her family's reputation with potential scandal. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. She demanded a full refund. The phone rang again. Harrison reluctantly answered. "This is Channel 8 News. We're investigating reports of discrimination at Pinehurst Country Club. Would you care to comment?" Harrison slammed the phone down, but it immediately rang again. "Atlanta Journal-Constitution, we'd like to speak with someone about allegations of discriminatory guest policies." He disconnected that call too, but the ringing continued. Each call brought another reporter, another question about practices he'd considered standard operating procedure just hours earlier. Margaret had gone pale. "Gregory, what's happening?" Before he could answer, his computer chimed with an urgent email from the club's insurance carrier. Subject: Urgent. Policy review required. "Mr. Harrison, we have been notified of potential discriminatory incidents at your facility. Per our policy terms, any discrimination claims trigger immediate review of your coverage. Please provide detailed incident reports for the past 24 months within 48 hours. Failure to comply may result in policy cancellation." Harrison's mouth went dry. Without insurance, the club couldn't operate legally. But the email's reference to the past 24 months suggested they somehow knew about previous incidents that had been quietly settled with confidentiality agreements. Another email arrived, this one from the club's attorney. "Greg, just received calls from 3 different law firms about potential discrimination suits. What the hell happened today? Call me immediately." Then another from their largest corporate member. "Harrison Meridian Technologies is canceling our corporate membership effective immediately. We cannot maintain association with organizations that practice discrimination. Expect other tech companies to follow suit." Harrison stared at the sender's email address, s.chen@meridiantech.com. The implications crashed over him like a physical blow. "Margaret," he said quietly, "what was the name of the woman who claimed to have a reservation earlier?" "Chen," Margaret replied, still clutching cancellation notices. "Sophia Chen." Harrison's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up Google. The search results for Sophia Chen Meridian Technologies filled his screen with images of awards ceremonies, business magazine covers, and news articles about one of Atlanta's most successful tech entrepreneurs. Forbes 30 Under 30. Atlanta Business Journal CEO of the Year. Georgia Technology Council Lifetime Achievement Award. Each headline hammered home the magnitude of his mistake. He'd dismissed and humiliated one of the most powerful business leaders in the state, treating her like she was nobody. "Oh, God," Margaret whispered, reading over his shoulder. "She's worth over $200 million. Harrison's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is just the beginning. Najis SC." As if summoned by the message, his secretary appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Harrison, there are 2 men here from the city attorney's office. They want to speak with you about lease compliance." Through his office window, Harrison could see a van from Channel 11 News pulling into the parking lot, followed closely by vehicles from 2 other local stations. Word was spreading faster than he could have imagined possible. Another text arrived. "Check your membership roster. See how many companies I'm connected to. -SC." With shaking hands, Harrison pulled up the club's membership database. As he scrolled through the list, he began recognizing names of companies where Sophia Chen served on boards, held major investments, or maintained business relationships. The connections formed a web that touched nearly every major corporation in Atlanta. She hadn't just struck back at him personally. She'd systematically identified every pressure point that kept Pinehurst financially viable and was methodically destroying them all. His desk phone rang again. The caller ID showed City Hall. "Mr. Harrison, this is Mayor Jefferson's office. The mayor needs to meet with you immediately regarding your municipal contracts and lease obligations." When? "Now, sir. There's a car waiting outside to escort you downtown." Harrison looked out his window. A black sedan with city government plates sat in the circular drive, flanked by the growing crowd of news vans. Margaret had begun crying quietly at her desk. The phone system showed 15 calls holding, and more were coming in every minute. "What do we do?" she asked. Harrison realized he had no answer. In less than 3 hours, his carefully constructed world had begun collapsing around him. The woman he'd dismissed as an unwanted intruder had revealed herself to be his worst nightmare. Someone with the power, connections, and determination to destroy everything he'd built. His phone buzzed with one final text. "You called my father and me loiterers. Now let's see who really doesn't belong. Now let's see who rares." The Atlanta City Council chambers buzzed with unusual energy for an emergency evening session. News of the Pinehurst investigation had leaked, drawing reporters, civil rights advocates, and curious citizens to witness what many sensed would be a historic confrontation. Sophia sat in the front row alongside Samuel, her posture confident but respectful. Behind them, 7 other families filled the benches, previous victims of Pinehurst discrimination who had agreed to testify after years of silence. Their presence transformed individual grievances into a pattern of institutional bias that could no longer be ignored. Mayor Jefferson called the session to order at exactly 6 o'clock. "We're here to address urgent matters regarding Pinehurst Country Club's municipal lease and compliance with city anti-discrimination policies." At the defendant's table, Gregory Harrison sat with his attorney, Richard Caldwell, a silver-haired man whose expensive suit couldn't mask his client's obvious distress. Harrison had aged years in the past few hours, his earlier confidence replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone watching his career implode in real time. "Mr. Harrison," Mayor Jefferson began, "you've been made aware of the allegations against your establishment?" "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor," Harrison stammered, clearly rattled, "but I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding about today's events." Councilwoman Patricia Roberts, a formidable woman who'd built her career on civil rights advocacy, leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, please explain your club's guest policy as it was communicated to Ms. Chen and her father." Harrison's attorney whispered urgently in his ear before he answered. "Our policy requires advance reservations made through current members. Ms. Chen didn't follow proper procedures." "Interesting," Councilwoman Roberts replied, consulting her notes. "Because we've obtained recordings of the phone calls Ms. Chen made to your establishment 3 weeks ago." The revelation hit Harrison like a physical blow. Sophia had mentioned recordings during her testimony, but he'd assumed she was bluffing. "Your employee, Jennifer Carlisle," the councilwoman continued, "clearly confirmed a reservation without mentioning any membership requirements. Would you like to hear the recording?" Harrison's face was drained of color. Jennifer Carlisle was a part-time reservations clerk who'd quit 2 weeks ago. In the chaos of staff turnover, no one had informed her about the unwritten policies used to screen unwanted guests. "That won't be necessary," his attorney interjected quickly. But Mayor Jefferson wasn't finished. "Ms. Chen, would you please describe what happened when you arrived at the club?" Sophia rose gracefully, her voice carrying clearly through the chambers. She recounted the events with clinical precision, avoiding emotional language while letting the facts speak for themselves. When she finished, the room was silent, except for the scratch of reporters' pens. "Mr. Harrison," Councilman Williams asked, "do you dispute Ms. Chen's account?" "I dispute the characterization," Harrison replied weakly. "We were following standard security protocols." "Security protocols?" Samuel Chen stood slowly, his military bearing evident despite his age. "Son, I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I know what security protocols look like. What you did was humiliation. Pure and simple." The packed gallery murmured approval. Samuel's quiet dignity and obvious credentials made his words carry special weight. Mayor Jefferson gestured toward the other families. "We have additional testimony from 7 other families who experienced similar treatment at your facility. Mrs. Franklin, would you please share your experience?" An elderly African-American woman rose from the 3rd row. "My grandson graduated from Georgia Tech last year. We made reservations for a celebration dinner, confirmed twice. When we arrived, they claimed the kitchen was closed for renovations." Her voice shook with controlled anger. "But through the windows we could see other families eating inside." One by one, the other families shared their stories. Each account followed the same pattern: confirmed reservations mysteriously vanishing, fabricated policy explanations, and systematic humiliation disguised as professional courtesy. Harrison slumped further into his chair with each testimony. What he dismissed as isolated incidents was being exposed as institutional practice. Councilwoman Roberts addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just discussing hurt feelings here. Pinehurst Country Club operates on city-owned land under a lease that requires compliance with federal and municipal anti-discrimination laws. She held up a thick folder. Our legal team has spent the afternoon reviewing that lease agreement. The violations we've heard described tonight trigger immediate termination clauses. Harrison's attorney shot to his feet. Councilwoman, these are allegations, not proven facts. My client deserves due process. Due process, Mayor Jefferson replied calmly, is exactly what we're providing, but the evidence is overwhelming, and the pattern is undeniable. He turned to Harrison directly. Sir, your establishment has systematically violated both the letter and spirit of your municipal agreements. The question now is what consequences are appropriate. Harrison finally spoke, his voice barely audible. What? What are you proposing? Councilwoman Roberts consulted her notes. Immediate termination of your city lease, effective within 30 days, forfeiture of all lease payments and deposits, and referral to federal authorities for civil rights violations. You can't do this, Harrison's attorney protested. My client has operated in good faith for decades. Good faith? Sophia's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. She hadn't been scheduled to speak again, but Mayor Jefferson nodded for her to continue. Mr. Caldwell, your client called my 78-year-old father and me loiterers. He suggested we'd be more comfortable at Applebee's. He systematically denied service while other guests watched and approved. Her voice remained controlled, but her words carried a devastating impact. If that's good faith, then words have no meaning. The gallery erupted in applause, quickly silenced by the mayor's gavel. Harrison looked around the chamber desperately, searching for sympathetic faces but finding none. Even the reporters seemed hostile. Their questions shouted from the back of the room, focusing on damage control rather than defense. Mr. Harrison, Mayor Jefferson said formally, do you have anything to say before we vote? Harrison struggled to his feet, his earlier arrogance completely gone. We never intended. You never intended to get caught, Samuel Chen interrupted quietly. There's a difference. The vote was unanimous. 6-0 in favor of lease termination, with one abstention from a councilman who'd recused himself due to financial connections to the club. As the gavel fell, Harrison realized his 30-year career was over. Without the city lease, Pinehurst couldn't operate. Without Pinehurst, he had no reputation in the hospitality industry. Sophia Chen hadn't just won. She'd systematically destroyed every foundation his professional life was built upon. As the chamber emptied, Sophia approached Harrison's table. His attorney stepped protectively between them, but she addressed Harrison directly. Mr. Harrison, you taught my father an important lesson today. You showed him that some people judge others by their appearance rather than their character. Her voice was quiet but clear. I hope today taught you a lesson too. She turned and walked away, leaving Harrison staring after her in stunned silence. Outside the building, reporters surrounded Sophia and Samuel. Miss Chen, what's next for Pinehurst Country Club? That's not my decision, she replied diplomatically. The city will determine the best use for that land. I just hope it serves all citizens equally. As they drove home through the Atlanta evening, Samuel looked at his daughter with profound respect. Your mother would have been proud of how you handled this. Mom always said justice delayed is justice denied, Sophia replied. Today justice wasn't delayed. Behind them, Pinehurst Country Club sat dark and empty. Its era of exclusivity finally ended. 3 months later, Sophia Chen stood on the exact spot where Pinehurst Country Club's entrance had once proclaimed its exclusivity. The wrought iron gates had been removed, the imposing signage dismantled, and construction crews were busy transforming the property into something Atlanta had never seen before. The Chen Community Center and Technology Hub, Samuel read from the architect's rendering posted near the entrance, has a nice ring to it. Sophia smiled, watching bulldozers clear the old golf course to make way for public recreational facilities, small business incubators, and educational programs. Mom always said we should build bridges, not walls. The transformation had been swift once the city council voted to terminate Pinehurst's lease. Within days, the property had been designated for public use, and Sophia's foundation had stepped forward with a comprehensive redevelopment proposal. What had once served the privileged few would now benefit the entire community. Ms. Chen, a familiar voice called from behind them. They turned to see Mayor Jefferson approaching with a woman in a hard hat, the project's lead architect. Marcus, Sophia greeted him warmly. How are the approvals coming? "Faster than anything I've seen in 20 years of public service," he replied with a grin. Turns out, when you have a project that everyone supports, bureaucracy moves at light speed. The architect, Dr. Angela Torres, spread updated blueprints across a nearby table. "The community input sessions have been incredible. We've incorporated suggestions from over 300 families." Samuel studied the plans, his engineer's eye tracking the layout. "This computer lab here, how many workstations?" 60, with high-speed fiber internet and professional-grade software, Dr. Torres explained. "Your daughter insisted on providing resources that could actually launch careers, not just teach basic skills." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Where Gregory Harrison had once denied access based on appearance, the new facility would provide opportunities regardless of background or economic status. "Speaking of careers," Mayor Jefferson said, "have you heard the latest about Harrison?" Sophia's expression remained neutral. "I try not to follow individual vindication stories." "Well, this one's worth knowing. He's working as a night manager at a budget hotel chain." Seems the hospitality industry has a long memory for discrimination scandals. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Actions have consequences. Always have." Dr. Torres pointed to another section of the blueprints. "The memorial garden will be located where the old clubhouse dining room stood. We're planning a dedication wall honoring families who've overcome discrimination in Atlanta." "Including the 8 families who testified at the hearing?" Sophia asked. "All of them, plus dozens of others who've come forward since the story broke. Their courage created momentum for change across the city." Indeed, the Pinehurst incident had sparked a broader reckoning. 3 other private clubs had voluntarily revised their membership policies, the city had strengthened anti-discrimination enforcement, and several businesses had implemented bias training programs to avoid similar scandals. "Ms. Chen," a reporter called from the parking area, Channel 8 News, "could we get a quick interview about the project's progress?" Sophia glanced at her father, who nodded encouragingly. They walked over to where the cameraman was setting up equipment near the construction site. "I'm here with Sophia Chen, CEO of Meridian Technologies and the driving force behind the Chen Community Center," the reporter began. "Ms. Chen, 3 months ago you were denied service at this location. Now you're transforming it into a public resource. How does that feel?" "It feels like justice," Sophia replied simply. "But more importantly, it feels like progress. This facility will serve families for generations, providing opportunities that were once restricted to a privileged few." "Do you have any message for Gregory Harrison, the former manager who discriminated against you and your father?" Sophia paused, choosing her words carefully. "I hope he's learned that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right. It's good business. Discrimination always costs more than inclusion." Samuel stepped forward slightly. "If I may add something, this isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring other families don't experience what we did." The reporter nodded. "Mr. Chen, as a veteran and father, what does this transformation mean to you?" "It means my granddaughter will grow up in a world where her worth isn't determined by her appearance," Samuel replied, his voice carrying quiet pride. "It means the sacrifices previous generations made for equality weren't in vain." After the interview, they continued touring the construction site. Workers called out greetings to Sophia, many recognizing her from news coverage. The contrast with her reception at Pinehurst couldn't have been starker. "Ms. Chen," a young woman in work clothes approached them. "I'm Maria Santos, the site foreman. I wanted to thank you personally." "Thank me? For what?" "My daughter applied for your tech scholarship program. She's starting Georgia Tech next month to study computer science." Maria's eyes welled with tears. "She's the first in our family to attend college." Sophia felt a familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when Meridian Technologies hired its 100th employee, when they'd opened their community coding program, when they'd mentored their first startup to success. "Your daughter earned that scholarship through her own merit," Sophia replied. "We just removed the barriers." As they walked toward the construction trailer that served as the project's temporary headquarters, Samuel noticed a familiar figure standing near the fence line. Gregory Harrison, looking years older than his actual age, was staring at the construction site with an expression of profound regret. "Dad," Sophia said quietly, following his gaze, "you don't have to acknowledge him." "Actually, I think I do." Samuel walked slowly toward the fence, Sophia following reluctantly. Harrison noticed their approach and straightened, clearly debating whether to flee or face the confrontation. "Mr. Harrison," Samuel said simply. "Mr. Chen." Harrison's voice was barely audible. I wanted to see what was being built here. And what do you think?" Harrison gestured toward the bustling construction site, the diverse workforce, the families walking through to observe progress. "It's remarkable. More vibrant than the club ever was." Samuel studied the man who'd humiliated him 3 months earlier. Gone was the arrogant authority figure, replaced by someone who appeared genuinely humbled by circumstances. "Mr. Harrison, do you understand why this happened?" "Because I was wrong," Harrison replied immediately, "because I let prejudice guide my actions instead of treating you with basic human dignity." Sophia watched the exchange with fascination. This wasn't the defensive, blame-shifting response she'd expected. "I lost everything," Harrison continued. "My career, my reputation, my sense of who I thought I was. But watching this project take shape, I realize I deserve to lose it all." Samuel's expression softened slightly. "The question is, what are you going to do with that understanding?" "I'm starting over, completely." Harrison's voice grew stronger. "I'm taking courses on diversity and inclusion, volunteering with organizations that fight discrimination. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to ensure it never happens again." "That's good," Samuel said simply. "Growth requires acknowledging mistakes." Harrison looked directly at Sophia. "Miss Chen, I know apologies are inadequate, but I am profoundly sorry for how I treated you and your father. You deserved respect, and I failed to provide it." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your words, but apologies only matter if they lead to genuine change." "I understand, and I hope someday my actions will prove that the change is real." As Harrison walked away, Samuel put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Your mother always said forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from anger." Quote, "I'm not ready to forgive yet," Sophia admitted, "but I'm willing to observe his transformation." They returned to the construction site, where Dr. Torres was explaining the innovative features planned for the technology center. Solar panels would power the entire facility, making it carbon neutral. The design incorporated universal accessibility standards, ensuring everyone could participate regardless of physical limitations. The grand opening is scheduled for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Dr. Torres announced. Seemed appropriate given the symbolism. Mayor Jefferson nodded approvingly. From a symbol of exclusion to a beacon of opportunity, the transformation is complete. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the construction site, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 3 months ago, she and her father had been turned away from this location, treated as unwelcome intruders. Today, they were overseeing its transformation into something that would serve the entire community. "Dad," she said as they prepared to leave, "do you think Mom would approve?" Samuel gazed across the bustling site, where workers of every background collaborated on building something unprecedented in Atlanta. "Sweetheart, she'd be proud beyond words. You didn't just fight discrimination, you transformed it into opportunity." "We transformed it," Sophia corrected. "Your dignity under pressure gave me the strength to respond appropriately." As they drove away from the construction site, the setting sun illuminated the project sign, Chen Community Center and Technology Hub, opening January 2026, serving all families with dignity and respect. The words captured everything Sophia had hoped to achieve. Where exclusion had once reigned, inclusion would flourish. Where barriers had been erected, bridges would be built. Where discrimination had thrived, opportunity would take root and grow. The transformation was complete, but the real work, changing hearts and minds throughout the community, was just beginning. And Sophia Chen, daughter of an Army engineer and a woman who dreamed of acceptance, was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Behind them, construction lights illuminated the site where tomorrow's leaders would learn, grow, and discover that their potential had no limits beyond those they set for themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.